The story I'm going to share with you today is a story about how I thought I almost lost two of the most important people in my life in mere minutes. My mother and my sister both had very scary things happen to them when I was little that changed my appreciation towards them forever. I'll first start with my sister's story. When this happened, I was 7 and my sister was 4. When we were little, we loved going to the library. We normally went with my dad, who was very strict on making sure we behaved, in and outside the library. But this time, we went with my mom, who wasn't so strict, and she let us do our famous race. Whenever my mom took us to the library, my sister and I would race to press the button on the pillar to make the doors open. Normally I would win, of course, being 3 years older than her. But this time, we were neck and neck. Of course, I didn't want to lose, so when I gained a little bit of a lead, I let my back foot drag just a little to slow her down. Well, at this point, we were just a few feet from the pillar, and she tripped over my foot and went face first into the bottom of the pillar. A side note, I think this pillar had just been redone as well, because at the bottom of the pillar there was a cement ring that came about 2 inches up, and a few weeks later, after we went back, the cement ring was gone. So my sister fell to the ground, and when I went to go pick her up, her face was covered with blood. My mom was just getting out of the car, so I yelled for her, and she came running to us. When she tells the story, she says she put her hand on my sister's forehead, and her finger slipped into the cut, and my mom knew right away that this was not just a scratch. So then my mom told me to go inside and get some help from the library staff. Well, none of them wanted to help. Instead, they handed me some insurance papers to make sure they weren't liable for what happened. So I ran back outside. At this point, my sister was screaming, my mom was freaking out, and we didn't know what to do. Then a gift from God came. A retired nurse was walking into the library and happened to have a medical bag in her car. As soon as she saw the blood, she ran back to her car and went into paramedic mode. She threw some gauze on my sister's head to control the bleeding, and then she wrapped her up in a blanket, and we all hopped into our van and headed to the acute care. When we got there, they knew right away that there was nothing they could do, so they sent us to the emergency room. They rushed my sister to the ER and laid her on the table. The next thing I saw I will never forget. While they were getting ready to numb the area so they could put in stitches, I looked past the doctor's shoulder and looked into the recently cleaned wound, and right then and there I could see my sister's skull. In fact, her cut was so deep that the doctor put in 75 stitches, 3 rows of 25. Of course, me being only 7 years old, throughout this whole process, I thought my sister was going to die. I was freaking out, and I felt so bad for my poor mother, who had to deal with me freaking out and my sister in the most pain she probably has ever felt. Like I said earlier, this whole series of events really gave me a new appreciation for my sister. And next we have my mother's story. My mother has had a long history of medical problems. When she was very young, I think it was 3 or 4, she had a stroke. This changed her life forever. Her whole life, the left side of her body has grown slower, and she has forever been cursed with random seizures. On a normal summer day, about a year or so after my sister's incident, my mother, her friend, my sister, and I went to a grand finale in Sioux Falls. This place was awesome. They had the biggest indoor climbing equipment I've ever seen, a huge foam pit, mini golf, pretty much anything fun you can imagine this place had. Going there was a huge treat, and when we would normally spend a whole afternoon there. While I was taking a break to get a drink of water and a hot dog, my mom had just gotten back from the restroom and was having a conversation with her friend. All of a sudden, she started calling my name, so I went over to see what the problem was. I responded to her call, and she just kept saying my name. Brady, Brady, Brady. I kept saying, "What, Mom? I'm right here." Then it happened. Her eyes started rolling back into her head, and her body became stiff as a board, and she started to sink into the floor of the booth that she was sitting at. I started yelling for help, and 2 gentlemen sitting in the food area grabbed my mom and pinned her to the floor. Then I ran to the front desk and had them call my dad. Someone also called 911. Eventually, they got my mom under control, and my dad and the paramedics showed up. They took my mom to the hospital, and my dad rode with. My mom's friend took us for a drive, and when my dad said everything was okay, she took us to the hospital too. Everything turned out all right, and no permanent damage was done to my mother. However, I will never forget the image of her eyes rolling back into her head. It was one of the scariest moments of my life, and really made me realize just how fast someone can be taken away from you.